Okay, so you're out there, you're looking at real estate,
Hmm.
you're thinking about different strategies for investing, and there's one that's a little bit out there
Yeah,
that we want to unpack today. It's
definitely.
called Subject to.
Yeah. And,
Subject to.
uh, when I first heard about this, I was like, what is this even? How does that even work?
Right.
But it's basically a way of taking ownership of a property without actually going through the traditional mortgage process.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
You're
And you're taking ownership,
It's a little wild.
but you're not going through the bank to get a loan.
Right.
You're actually taking over the seller's existing mortgage
Okay.
payments.
Less paperwork, but maybe a little more trust involved.
A lot more trust.
Yeah.
I would say a lot more trust.
So I could see how this could be attractive to both sides, like in the right situation.
Definitely.
But I imagine there are some serious caveats here.
Yeah.
Our sources mention a scenario where a homeowner needs to sell quickly.
And they've got maybe like a $200,000 mortgage.
Yeah, so in that case, an investor could come in and say, hey, I'll take over your payments,
Wow.
get you out of the situation, and the investor gets control of the property without having to qualify for a new mortgage themselves.
Okay, so it's almost like taking over a car lease or something?
Yeah, kind of like
Except with
that.
like a lot bigger.
Yeah, a much bigger car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot more at stake.
Definitely.
Oh,
And also, you're avoiding that whole bank process,
it's true.
which can be a huge benefit these days with interest rates the way they are.
Right, so you could potentially,
Potentially get a much lower interest rate
yeah,
than what's currently available.
if you're taking over an existing mortgage.
Exactly.
Wow, okay, so
So that's a big plus for the investor.
that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Now, what about a situation where the property is actually worth more than the remaining mortgage balance? Our sources highlight this case where, let's say the property's valued at $300,000,
Right.
but the mortgage is only $250,000.
Right. That's a good example.
What happens then?
So in that scenario, the investor would still take over the mortgage payments like we talked about,
Okay.
but they'd also pay the seller that difference.
Okay.
So in this case, the $50,000
Sure.
outside of the mortgage agreement.
So they're basically getting that equity.
They're getting a discount
Yeah.
based on that lower mortgage amount.
Wow.
So the seller gets cash in hand
Right.
and the investor gets a good deal on the property.
The win-win on the surface?
Yeah, on the surface it looks great,
But
but there's some big buts.
Them big butts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Working here.
Subject to is not without risks.
Right?
And the biggest risk really falls on the buyer.
Okay.
If the buyer defaults on those mortgage payments,
Oh.
the lender can still go after the original seller, even though they no longer own the property.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So that is a huge,
It's a big gamble.
yeah, a huge gamble for the seller to take.
Yeah. So
See-
you're relying on the continued good credit of someone else.
Right. Like it's not
That is a little scary.
just a signature. right?
Definitely you're free.
Yeah. You're really putting your financial future in someone else's hands.
Right.
It's
So is that a
fascinating.
major deterrent for
Ugh.
a lot of investors?
It is for a lot of people,
I would imagine.
but for some,
Yeah.
it can be a worthwhile risk if they do their due diligence.
Okay, so due diligence, huge here.
Absolutely.
What exactly do you mean by that? Like,
So you need to really scrutinize the property,
That-
understand every detail of that existing mortgage agreement.
right,
Interest rates, prepayment penalties, the whole 9 yards.
all of it.
And probably have a real estate attorney look over everything
Okay.
before you even think about moving forward.
Yeah.
Because
It's just not, there's also the due on sale clause to consider.
due on sale clause?
Yeah.
What is that?
So basically, it's a clause in a lot of mortgages that allows the lender to demand full payment of the loan if the property is sold without their consent.
Wow.
And subject to agreements can sometimes trigger that clause.
Oh, so that's a big risk
Yeah, it can put the whole deal at risk.
for both parties.
For both sides, yeah.
So it's not as simple as shaking hands
No.
and walking away.
It's a lot more complicated.
Yeah. Okay, so in the right circumstances, though, with all this research, with professional guidance,
If you do it right,
could subject to actually be
it could be.
a viable strategy,
Yeah,
even in a crazy market like we have today.
that's the question, isn't it? Factors like rising interest rates, property values, the availability of traditional financing,
Right.
all those things play a role.
Okay.
It might be particularly attractive for investors who are looking to acquire properties quickly, especially distressed properties where a traditional sale might be difficult.
Wow. This has given me a lot to think about.
Yeah, it's a lot to digest,
It is.
but it's a fascinating strategy.
It is, for
If you're-
sure. And I mean, so much to consider here
Definitely.
when we're weighing the potential benefits
Yeah,
and the risks of this unconventional approach.
absolutely.
So if subject 2 has piqued your interest out there,
Yeah.
I encourage you to dig deeper.
Do your research.
Do your research.
Talk to some experts.
Talk to the professionals.
Yeah.
Look at local market conditions. And maybe,
No.
just maybe, subject 2 could be the key to unlocking your next real estate
It
investment.
could be the one.
Oh, it could be.
That's right.
All right, thanks for joining us for this deep dive today.
My pleasure.
We'll see you next time.
See you later.